Thanks, Craig. Hi. Right, I'm going to go through the three main areas of MetaJOBS, which is the job side, the subcontract side, and the contract sales side. As we said, there's also a payroll integration, but there's not much to see with that really. It's an integrated file that goes between Sage and back into MetaJOBS. So we'll concentrate on the three chunkier areas of this, and the first one of those being the jobs. Now what I'll do is I'll just overview this in the PowerPoint, and then after that we'll go into the product and have a look at it in the real actual product itself. So in terms of jobs themselves can then be divided into a hierarchy of tasks. So these tasks actually build up your work breakdown structure. So they can be, you can have headings, you can have subtasks, they can be indented, and what it will do is these can be really, really simple. So they can be just something along the lines of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, or they can be really detailed. It's really down to the individual projects and what is appropriate. We'll cover that when we have a look at it in a moment in the software. Each of those tasks themselves are broken down into job planning lines. And job planning lines are the details behind those individual tasks. And they can be cost lines, which they call budget, or they can be sale lines, which they call billable. There are lines that can be both, but generally it's more sensible to keep it as one or the other. It just makes it a bit easier to manage. Now, we have an additional cost type within MetaJOBS. It uses a dimension, and it can be split into what we call a 5-way split, which is materials, labour, subcontractors, plant and sundry. This is a common construction sort of breakdown of cost types, and within those they have the cost headers. So the cost headers themselves are user defined, so you have your own sets of cost headers. So for materials you might have pipe work, brick work, that type of thing, different types of materials. Under labour you might have different types of labour, subcontractors, different trades. Under plant you might have different categories of plant, that type of thing. That build up your cost headers. One other thing to mention is that you can have multiple customers to one job. Jobs are broken down into contracts, and underneath those they can be for different customers. So if you have, for example, a major contractor building a building for you, it's then inherited by an end customer, you might have contracts with both of those organisations that are relevant to that same project. So they can be classed underneath that same project in MetaJOBS. Some products out there restrict you to one customer to one job, but MetaJOBS allows you to have more. Within those jobs, and we'll see this in a moment, you can store a lot of the key details for your projects, such as contacts, dates and site addresses, and we'll show you those in a moment. So I'm going to zip out of the PowerPoint for a moment, close that down, and you can see in the background, hopefully that screen's refreshed, and you can see the role center, a typical role center for MetaJOBS. This is for a project manager. This is in NAV 2017, so I don't know what versions you guys are running, but this is the latest front screen. Doesn't look too much different to the previous ones. You've got your color-coded stacks in there, which is quite nice. We've got the graphs and everything, but there is actually one note on 2017 is that if you have this hosted in Azure, those graphs you can see over there can be fed by Power BI, which is quite a nice feature. Gives you a bit more richness to those graphs, which I think traditionally have been quite flat. Anyway, into MetaJOBS and into jobs, you can see on the right-hand side, left-hand side, sorry, I've got a jobs list and a typical list from NAV. I mean, you guys have seen NAV so many times that you probably don't need to have an overview of the look and feel, so we'll get straight into it. I'll take this meta demo job here and go into there. You can see it's got a couple of sections to it. So, top header shows you who the job is, the key customer on there, build to, details, etc. You can list, again, you've got your show fewer fields and show more. Down here, this section here shows you the breakdown that we were talking about before, the work breakdown structure. So this particular one has got a build down or broken down into the preliminaries, the piling, the build, some M&E that's going on, and we've got a variation that's been placed against that particular project. variations in MetaJOBs would be done as additional tasks rather than being a separate entity. If I go into one of those, you can go into the job planning lines at the top. You can see they're broken down into further levels of detail. So this is the cost. So this effectively is your budget for that particular job. So you've got individual lines, you've got different cost types in there. You can see subcontractors, materials, you've got some labour building up. You've got planning dates you can put in there, so you can actually put some dates against these tasks. So I can say at the moment, the one we've got is quite a high level. But those planning lines can be really detailed. They can be right down to individual activities against that project. And you can see across here you've got a build up towards the total cost, which you'll be used to seeing in the in MetaBuild and in NAV generally. So you can see there we've got the build up of that budget for the job. We'll go down the page. We've got down here some posting details. So you've got statuses for jobs, so you can manipulate the job through various statuses as it progresses. You've got which is highlighted details. They come through from the planning lines. Project details down here. You've got some key dates, a practical completion date. So you can have your retention, for example, set up at say 5%, which reduces automatically at the practical completion date to 2.5%. So you might be able to do that retention posting at that point in time automatically. We've got personnel under there, so you've got key personnel that are working on the project. Underneath there's various other more standard kind of nav fields. So you can do WIP, that's all standard nav, using standard nav WIP, so it doesn't use anything new to MetaJOBs, it uses the standard ways. And there's multiple ways that nav can work out the work in progress on a project as it goes through. Okay, over on the right hand side here you can see the fact box. We've got the budget amounts over there and they're broken down as per the planning line. So that's why we have that fixed 5-way split that we talk about, so that these fact boxes can be placed into the product. And as you can see, the hyperlinks, so if you drill into those hyperlinks, you see it draws into the individual part of that budget that we saw previously coming through from the job planning lines. Okay, so that's the job screen. We'll go back into the PowerPoint. Just progress this on. The next section we're dealing with is the subcontractors. So MetaJOBs has a dedicated subcontractor module, so it's fully CIS compliant. We have a direct link to the Inland Revenue website, so verifications can be done directly from within the product, as well as monthly returns. So there's no need for any sort of third-party software to get those things running. All the standard billing methods you'd expect are in there, so you can do self-billing. If you're doing applications, certificates, cumulatives, that type of thing, you can put that through self-billing. Also, there's tax invoices if your subcontractors give you invoices. And if you need to, there's authenticated receipt in there as well. One important thing on subcontracting that always comes up is the split of labour. Because obviously it really directly affects the amount of tax that's calculated. And in MetaJOBs, that can be done at the line level. So for every posting that you do, you can indicate the amount of labour and non-labour on that particular line, so that it works out the deductions correctly for you. You can break your, you can hand out to your subcontractors contracts. These are particularly if you're doing self-billing and authenticated receipt, but they can also be relevant to tax invoice. You can break them down into a line level detail, a bit like a purchase order, I suppose. You can break down into different activities that you might want the subcontractor to do. You can still cumulative values against those contracts as you're doing your payments as they're going through. You do individual valuations and you value the work on a cumulative basis, and it automatically calculates the relevant retention and discount for you. In terms of orders, there's an additional order routine that you can have in there. This is primarily for tax invoices, so it works a bit like a purchase order where you can effectively receipt individual lines against the invoice as well. You can link it to subcontract contracts, if you want to deduct retention and discounts automatically off those invoices as well. But it's a dedicated subcontractor order that sits within the system. Now you can post applications through, so this is where your subcontractor may apply to you for payment, and you can record this in two places. You can either do it in a dedicated screen, where as the applications come in, you record against the contract what's been applied for, and obviously you decide, or somebody else in your organisation may decide exactly what it is you are going to pay them, and you can post that through the payment notice. Or what you can do is, when you're doing the payment notice, you can record as a memo figure effectively what the guy applied for. So there's two different spots that you can actually put those applications in on. Obviously, it's managing retentions, very important. It's deducting retentions appropriately as you're posting transactions through. You've got the levels of retention reporting in there, age retentions, that kind of thing, and you've got the retention release process as well. So I'm just going to show you, oh sorry, one thing I meant to mention in there is the insurance and certificate. So quite important with subcontractors. You don't want to send a guy out to a site if he's not covered for insurance. So you can record all their insurance details and certificates. These can be bespoke records that you keep. So you make up the individual insurance certifications that you want to store against that subcontractor. And something that's key about it is you've got due dates against those documents and actions off the back of it. So there's a bit of workflow in there, so that if an insurance expires, you can block the subcontractor. You can block him at different levels. So you can say block him for everything, or block for just new orders or payments, or whatever you decide. And we can just show you that against the subcontractor form in a moment. So back into MetaJOBS, over to the subcontractor side, and you can see we've got a list of subcontractors here. We go into Trent Landscaping. You can see you've got key details at the top there. You've got a retention balance against them. And again, you can drill into this and you can see the breakdown of that retention balance at any point in time. You've got the general balance of what's owed to that subcontractor displayed. And if I go down to the bottom of that screen, you can see CIS details stored. And those CIS details get updated through the verification routines we've got at the top here. So on the ribbon, you can see online verification. When you go in there, it brings up a list of all the subcontractors. You can identify the ones that you want to go and match with the non-revenue, or indeed go and verify. And when you verify, what it would do is it will bring back the details of the tax status and the verification number from the non-revenue. It will populate them down here, so you can see the verification number. The tax status is in there. This one is unmatched. Obviously, it will come through as gross net, depending on the on what the non-revenue say they are at any point in time. So you can run that routine. You don't have to run it individually for each subcontractor. You can run it and it will pick up the subcontractors that you put into it as you run that routine. Okay, the certifications that we were talking about a moment ago. If we're going to navigate here, you've got certifications. So in here against this particular subcontractor, as you can see, I've got two set up. I've got an employer's liability with a certificate number and an expiry date. And I've got another one at height. So the height one is, say, for example, you've got a particular insurance around working at height. Like I say, these are user defined. So in this screen, you can go through and you can make up your individual insurance or your different types of certificates that you want to store, and you can say the rules. So do you block the subcontractor on expiry? Do you allow duplicates? You know, you've got date, certificate number required. Are they mandatory, for example? So you can't progress with a subcontractor unless you've got these details stored against them. Okay, for the time being, so you can go into another one, a driving license. You're going through, you can enter the detailed numbers, put the dates in. That may not have an expiry, and away you go. Okay, so that's the subcontractor card, and again, we're just trying to do this at a very high level. So if you wanted more details, we can come and see you and talk through those. In terms of processing, let's go to the search at the top here, I'll just show you that there is a dedicated application journal. And here you can go through and just key in individual applications that have come through from subcontractors. And that might be a process that you do separately from the payment notices that you do. And as you go through into the payment notices, you can see here I've got one set up here. You've got a previous application value that can come through and an application amount. So those can come through either from that journal or they can be keyed in as you're keying in that particular payment notice. Now, I'm just going to go back a step very quickly. I think this is a more significant screen to show you, which is the subcontractor contract card. What you can do in here, you put your subcontractors. So I've got a subcontractor at the top here, ABC Contractors. I've got a job, so I've got this Deerfield job over here, and I've got a particular line. Now these contracts can be made up of multiple lines, and the idea is that you're holding cumulatives against each of those lines. So you put in a contract value, and then as you're putting those payment notices in, you're putting them in as a percentage of that particular contract amount. You can put values in as well, and you can put them in as movements. But you're effectively what you're doing is you're building up against those particular contract lines as you go through. So there's full approvals in here. So you can see you've got a release at the top, and in there there's a send approval request. So as you put your contract on, you can get it approved within the business as well. Okay, and there's a print which just shows you pretty standard print. I think you'd all be pretty much familiar with the standard kind of NAV reporting. The general idea that you'll go in and you'll modify that to your own spec as you during the implementation. Okay, so you've got your contracts, you've got your payment notices, you can do quotes and orders as well, and you can go through, you've got your approval requests in there as well for those particular contracts and for payment notices and for invoices. Okay, so if we go back to the PowerPoint, because I'm just conscious of time, the last section we've got here is on contract sales. So basically there are two contract sales billing methods. And the key one really is the first one, which is applications and payment notices. We've also got contract sales, sales orders. So if you've got a sales order, you can allocate it to a contract, into a task line, into a planning line as well, which is something the standard NAV doesn't do. But the key one here is the applications and payment notices. So in there, you can set up your variation schedules, and what they are is it's like the roadmap of when you're expecting applications to be made to your customer. So it's a bit like, I suppose, a broad brush, quite basic cash flow for the project. So if you've got when you're expecting the applications to go on, you can derive really when you're expecting payments to come through for those particular projects as well. Now those applications can be broken down into line level details. So then if you're doing applications at the moment, generally what people do is they put a spreadsheet together with a whole load of lines on, which they indicate the progress against the contract, and then maybe the high level details are keyed into a system. In MetaJOBS, you can key that line level detail of the application into the product. And again, it's moving on, it's doing the retentions and discounts automatically for you as well. It's cumulative posting, so as you're putting your applications on for a series of evaluations, you're updating the cumulatives and moving that on into the to be certified in the payment process. Sales orders is very much like standard NAV sales orders, except for the fact that you've got the jobs and task lines. You can include retentions and discounts, which is one of the misconceptions about this, but whether you can actually include those in the sales order. You can with the contract sales order that we have in MetaJOBS. You can pull retention and discounts through. Have an invoicing process for that. So we'll quickly come out. I'm going to go back into MetaJOBS, into the contract sales side, and you can see I've got customers in there. I've got sales contracts. I'm going to pick out a particular sales contract. You can see in here, under the sales contract, I've got my lines at the bottom here. And those lines are the ones I was referring to that you may keep in a spreadsheet. So this is the lines a customer wants you to prepare your applications with these level of details. So if you go through, You can see the individual lines, and you can see across how much those contract lines are for. You can see how much you've applied for, how much has been certified, how much has been invoiced, etc. as you're going through. Okay. So the sales applications themselves, we'll go into an application. This is something you may put together. You can see on the right-hand side in here, this is one for the Canon Group against a particular contract, job 130. You can see the valuation number. If we go to the valuation number, you can see that's held in a schedule. So you have a schedule set up. And you can see how much it's going to be applied for as we're going through. So this is the sort of roadmap I was telling you about of the individual valuations. So in this particular case, they're expecting to make an application for work valid up to these dates. And they're expecting to make the application on those dates. It doesn't hold you to those dates, but it's handy to know them. It can be good for triggers for people in the business for when they should be doing applications for. Okay, so this particular application here is then broken down by those contract lines that we were talking about. And really the process is you go through. So for example, if you feel you've done some of this work on build level 2, you can go in and you can say we've done 25% of that work. You can see then across the screen that it's calculating the values for you and building that up into the summary and the statistics of the amount you're applying for, the amount of retention and discount. You can control which one comes off first, retention or discount. There's a setting in the software that allows you to manage that, and it builds up your application amount. And there's a nice little summary of it in the test report, which is shows you the high-level details. That can also be broken down into those individual contract lines, which is the kind of document you would want to send out to the customer, including this level of detail. And those applications then get passed through a process of payment notices, counter notices if they come back and they need to reduce the amounts of the payments, and go straight through to the normal payment process. Again, like with subcontractors, you've got retention due reports, you've got debtors reports, all that normal type of stuff you'd expect, and you can see all that recorded up against the customers. But very much a high-level kind of overview of the different modules of MetaJOBS. This conference now we've reached 10:30, so I don't know if Craig, you want to just summarise anything in there?